The grid. My wife of 1 year has been having an emotional and physical affair with a guy from work. This started before we were even married. She said the first time it got physical was 2 years ago. I found out from the AP's longtime girlfriend last month, not my wife. I confronted my wife and she came clean because she knew I had proof with a huge amount of text messages that were very detailed. Since I met my wife about 5 years ago, she has struggled with anxiety, depression, PTSD from childhood, and alcohol problems. At the beginning of August, she attempted to take a bunch of anxiety meds when she had come home late with a back of double the legal limit, around 2. She was hospitalized for a few days where I stayed by her side. This all stemmed from the drama behind me finding out about the affair, and her still dealing with how to handle it with work and the affair partner. A huge mess for someone with anxiety and depression, and for me. She has been out of the hospital for 3 weeks. She told me she wants to see if we can make it work between us, but it is very complicated. With the affair, just dealing with that for myself had been terrible. Yet she doesn't want to talk about it and gets overwhelmed very quickly when I even start a conversation about little parts of dealing with this slowly, so we really haven't made any progress. She says she's done with the affair partner, but I know they are in contact at work every day, and in her mind, leaving her job is not in the cards right now, which is okay with me for the time being, but I don't think our marriage will work in the long run with her still there at night. A restaurant, all week long, and the affair partner being there. It's also just not a good environment for her in general, restaurant being a late night deal with drinking and partying going hand in hand with the lifestyle. We have a 3-year-old son and this also makes things a little more complicated, of course. I have put the affair stuff kind of on the back burner and just asked her to tell me if she is going to have contact that is inappropriate with this guy or any other man, but can I really trust anything she says at this point? I don't really think so many lies have been told to me. I'm trying to let her get her head right and get the anxiety and depression and alcohol under control, but I'm afraid we are just slipping back to how things were with a slightly different context or starting point. I guess I am just asking for any tips or any advice on what I should do, and if any more information is needed to give more context, just ask. Anything helps. Even just writing this made me feel a little better. My comment: document the hell out of all this and find yourself an aggressive lawyer. She is toxic in all aspects. With this history, I would recommend a DNA on the child. Get her out of your life. As mentioned, implement the 180 and let your attorney deal with it. If he is your child, protect him. You may have a case for full custody. OP responds. In June, she was prescribed anxiety medication. She's been struggling with alcoholism and dangerous behavior like drinking and driving for years. More intensely within the past year or so. She has mentioned thoughts of suicide to me before within the past couple months before discovery of the affair, wanting to drive off the road and whatnot. She said it started as her wanting to make an anxiety attack stop and then taking the rest of a bottle to make all of this stop forever, all of the turmoil and the anxiety and her depression and so on. She had her meds switched around in the hospital and is scheduled to see a therapist next week. I am in no way against filing for a divorce. I've met with 2 lawyers already. I am just simply reaching out to get some additional perspective, but in no way am going to let this continue without an incredible effort from her and extreme changes. It is a month today since I found out about the affair and was not trying to make snap decisions during crisis. Thank you all again for your thoughts. My father was exactly like her and did this to my mom for many years, and I find myself doing the same thing my mother did, who I obviously idolized. So you are correct and hit the nail on the head. Trying to overcome those issues in this situation and making that cycle stop here. The second lawyer I talked to, who I'm going to use, has said an annulment is probably a better option if we can make certain factors clear in court and may give me better luck at receiving full custody of my son. I haven't had a DNA, but I'm pretty certain he is mine. He is my clone, almost identical to me at his age. I know that's not definitive, but I would maybe get one if the lawyer recommended it, and like others have said to show my WW that I don't trust anything possibly. Even if he wasn't mine somehow, I wouldn't care. He is everything to me. I will be getting an STD test for sure. I am definitely no expert in any of this. She is seeing a therapist next week, but it's all up to her how she's going to handle it and accept the help she needs. I am giving all my hope that she gets a therapist that is suited to help her properly, but like I said, that side ultimately is really out of my control. Update: been focusing on myself and busy. The replies stopped getting into my regular inbox for some reason and started going spam, also why it took me a while. I appreciate everyone keeping in touch. Long time has passed. Wife is still in the house, but I have told her that there's no way this marriage is going to work in the long term. She continued lying and continued contact with the AP and just has completely lost control. And not long after my post, I decided it just wasn't going to ever work. She lied too many times and I will never be able to fully trust her again, and I will always be sleeping with one eye open. Loyalty is the most important thing in a relationship to a man and to a lot of women. Even if things were good for years after this, which they probably would never be, people like this don't change. I would still always wonder and have to be the babysitter in some way. She completely changed the dynamic of any kind of relationship we could have had because she turned me into the paranoid husband who was always checking and being needy and acting like a bee, not the masculine man she once met and fell in love with. I am getting back to my old self, and it obviously flipped her life upside down, but she'll get over it. All of her problems and issues will never be resolved with me as her doormat and her friendly pushover husband who always forgives. That only enables her to continue this behavior. She claims to have hit rock bottom during all of this, but I don't think she has. When she gets the papers and I receive custody of our son, then maybe, and she can realize she needs to change if she will ever be happy in any relationships in the future or in life in general. I've been logging all of her behavior that relates to treating our son as a second-class citizen behind herself and building a case for the custody. It's pretty much cut and dry. Financially, I was hit hard by lockdown stuff, and the government is screwing me with tax returns or things with the living situation, and lawyer assistance would be different at this point. But I am staying strong and haven't given in to any of the BS and drama in about 2 months now. I thank you all for the encouragement, but I guess I needed to go on my own journey with it. I have grown a lot through this experience and have learned a lot about what I want in any future relationships and in my life in general. What a relief. I don't want anything to do with this marriage anymore, and she knows it. I think it's finally sinking in for her, as her behavior is getting more and more erratic. But like I said, it can't change the fact that this will never work in the long run. Just wanted to add that the divorce papers aren't far out, just so no one jumps all over my ass here. We are in a live-in separation and we barely see one another, and she is only around my son if I know for a fact she is sober and awake and safe for him to have contact with. Just wanted to clarify. Other realizations have popped up over the last 4 months. When her and I got together 5 years ago, we were still relatively young and we were in different places in life that we are now, and I was in a very different mindset then and throughout our relationship as opposed to the one I've grown into today. We were both weak and we both chose each other for reasons that were unhealthy. We were not complete people when we met, and we both had issues with our childhood and parental relationships that we were not conscious about and hadn't fully dealt with. I was not very mature in relationships and made bad choices in partners for a long time, and I was not very emotionally or mentally mature. As years went on with us, I slipped into a codependency relationship with her, one that I was so accustomed to from childhood, and it was like riding a bike to be that way. When you are not conscious or in denial about the way those things from your childhood truly affect you, it is very hard to break that cycle. Like you said, without therapy it is almost impossible. I made a lot of mistakes in our relationship, but nothing warrants cheating and lying like she did, of course, and it is unacceptable. I'm taking this opportunity to really out time and to change myself for the better and to truly grow. I do feel that this happened for a reason, to really wake me up, to shake me to become the person I am truly meant to be and work through the issues that are holding me back in life. I can only look back now and try to learn from all of this and to be grateful for the things I am able to learn from any experience, even ones that are not so pleasant. My comment: you should file if this still eats at you. It is a waste of energy dealing with this. The fact this happened before the marriage makes it worse. If you choose to accept the fact that this will keep eating you. Story 2. Okay, so here goes. My story, although long, I'm sure is one that will resonate with many. Maybe it's midlife, I'm sure that's a part of it, or maybe something else, I just don't know. I will try to keep it short, but I know I won't succeed and I'm sure I'll get some detractors, but I can't help the way I feel. Anyway, here's my story. I've been together with my spouse for closing in on 30 years. I say spouse because technically we aren't married, but we've been common law for so long there really is no definable difference, so I do think of my spouse as my wife. We have 2 children, both boys, aged 22 and 13. She is an absolutely great mother and has done a wonderful job of raising 2 fantastic young men. She is kind and thoughtful to me and has been a loving wife for our time together. As is the case with any other couple, we've had our ups and downs, but for the most part I would describe our relationship as a good one. We've both remained faithful and I've never doubted her commitment to us or her love for me. So, what's the problem then? What's wrong with me that I want out? There have been so many changes over the years, and we got together so young that I find myself married to someone that I simply don't feel romantically about anymore. To be honest, I'm not really sure how we ever got together, as we are so different. She's a couch potatoes and I love playing sports. She's very social, I'm more of a small circle guy. We have similar political and religious beliefs, but that's about where it ends. A few years back she ran into some health issues. Really, there has always been health issues, and it seems every few years something comes up. I won't get too deep into this, but I will say that some of the more serious of them has been the appearance of a few cysts at different times in her life that resulted first in a partial hysterectomy 15 years ago and then 8 years ago a full hysterectomy. These medical procedures brought on early menopause and all the side effects that women must endure with it. I feel pretty confident that most of her health issues can be related to her weight. When we first started dating, she was a very small person at just slightly over 5 feet tall, and I would guess her weight to be just over the 100-pound mark. She hasn't grown any in height, but she has added well in excess of 100 pounds to her small frame. The health issues that she has dealt with as a result are staggering. I still love her, but I will admit that the lusty physical attraction just isn't there anymore. Anyway, our physical life was what I would characterize as adequate, for most of our relationship anyway. I say adequate because that's about it. It's been a very vanilla, less than exciting bonding, but I guess lights off missionary bonding gets the job done. After her hysterectomy, she lost pretty much all interest in bonding, but she hid this from me. At first, she did a good job of pretending, but slowly frequency and the quality of bonding dropped off. We went for a few years of having maintenance bonding maybe once a month, but from her end of it, it was done with all the passion and emotion that she would do any other household chore, and it was only at my initiation. If I didn't push for bonding, she would happily go without it. I put that theory to the test once and didn't initiate. We went 3 months before she asked why I wasn't hounding her. This left me feeling rejected and unwanted, feelings that to this day I haven't gotten over, and those insecurities still haunt the back of my mind. We had a heart-to-heart about this, and she admitted that she had lost interest because of menopause. She confided that bonding was at times painful for her, and there simply was not much interest on her part because of hormonal changes. I could have understood this and dealt with it had she shared this with me in the early stages, but she didn't, so I dealt with years of self-doubt and feelings of rejection. Those thoughts and feelings don't go away overnight. But this brings me to my second issue, communication. We had grown complacent and lazy in our relationship. If we spent a night at home, she spent her night trolling Facebook while I stared blankly at a TV. These nights were few though, as I would usually be busy taking my kids to extracurricular activities. Conversations with her were superficial and shallow. My wife is pretty smart most times, although I do find myself scratching my head at her logic when she lets her emotions get in the way. I find myself spending a lot of time doing damage control because she has gotten offended by somebody and she goes way of the deep end in dealing with it. She certainly challenges me intellectually, and I enjoy the engaging conversations. As we age, we change, all of us. Our life experiences and the battles we face forge who we become. The trouble I find myself struggling with is that I simply don't like who she has become. I'm a fairly easygoing guy. I like to look at the big picture and tend to not sweat the small stuff, whereas she seems to take everything to the extreme, and it is turning her into this bitter, angry ball of hate all the time. My kids often comment on how quickly she goes from being fine to angry with one wrong word. My youngest son plays hockey, and while he is a very good hockey player, I have no delusion that he will ever be good enough to move beyond playing anything more competitive than community hockey. For that reason, I take all the hockey politics in stride. She, on the other hand, has been so mad with our hockey association for 3 years now, and her anger has bled into every other aspect of her life, and it has changed her from a friendly, happy person to be around and turned her into the bitter, vengeful person that nobody likes. I admit that the association kind of screwed my son a bit, but he doesn't seem to mind, and like I said, it is just community hockey for little kids, so it's not like we're talking about million-dollar contracts. I don't see it as that big of a deal, so I refuse to let it poison my life, but she interprets that as not supporting her. Truth be told, the issues we've had with our hockey association really stem from her getting mad at the hockey coordinator and causing a big rift with her. The problem is that it is like this all the time. My son is quite athletic and plays many sports. We have had to change sports associations a number of times because she continually burns bridges with her anger and her overbearing need to play Mama Bear. If we go to one of his games, I won't even sit with her because I find her behavior and how she conducts herself to be an embarrassment. My son has commented on more than one occasion that he would rather than she not come. I feel guilty for wanting to leave because she treats me well and loves me very much, but I simply don't like the person she has become. She is the opposite of what I wanted for a wife. There are other factors that I'm sure as I discuss this and reply back to comments will filter out, but this is a good starting point. In the end, it's like this: I'm not happy with her. I'm getting older and find myself wondering why I'm still there, because waiting to start over again isn't going to make it any easier. And I find myself wondering if it's too late to start over again already. And finally, I don't want to hurt her. She's never been anything but great to me, and she doesn't deserve to be hurt, but staying and being miserable isn't going to give her a happy life either. I love her enough that I want her to be happy, and I know staying won't do that for her because I know I'm not going to be happy. So, what do? I will admit the weight issue is a big one for me and has been for a long time, but it has never been a deal breaker. When I was growing up, my mother was extremely obese. I spent my years as a youth watching as people pointed at her, laughed or made fun of her, and whispered behind her back. It is painful to watch the one person who your world revolves around endure the ostracism that society imposes on obese people. I now fear that my kids face those same emotional challenges. In addition is the health issues, and we've had a great many discussions about that. My mother and her were very close, and she is very much aware of all the health issues my mother had as a direct result of her obesity. In the end, it was my mother's size that resulted in her dying at 56 years old. I've told my wife that she is heading down the same path and needs to get off of it and get healthier. Carrying around an extra 150 pounds is going to put her in an early grave. My kids want somebody that's going to be around and be a grandmother to their children, and I want a wife that is going to be at my side as we grow old, not a burial plot that I visit every Sunday in my 50s. I've spoken to her many times about her anger issues and how she's pushing everybody away, and she admits that she gets carried away at times, but it never changes. As I mentioned in my first post, she is still trying to find ways of getting revenge over kids' sports issues that happened 3 years ago. That's just not normal behavior. I've always thought myself to be a fairly progressive modern husband. I share in the housework, I do all the cooking and I do all the laundry. My wife has her jobs around the house, as do I, but I think the work is split pretty evenly. As far as the child rearing goes, as I said in my previous post, she's the ultimate mama bear, and I won't try to lay claim to how great our kids turned out. That's all on her. She was a great mother. I helped where I could and tried to be a positive role model, but she was the guiding hand in their development. I realized after almost 25 years things were getting stale and we were drifting apart. Her battles with menopause were having their toll on her, and I realized that I could be a better partner and be more attentive to her needs. I internalized the problems that we were having with intimacy as a reflection of my failure to meet her needs and took it upon myself to be the best husband anybody could ask for. I did Google search after Google search looking for romantic ideas to make her feel special and show her that I was invested in her happiness. I sent texts throughout the day to say I was thinking about her. I learned about essential oils and massage and made a point of giving her a hot oil massage every week. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but this was no 10-minute back rub. This was a 2-hour massage from fingertip to toes. I sent flowers to her work with romantic notes. For example, I sent a dozen red roses to her at work one day with one white rose in the middle. Got the idea off the internet. Attached was a card that said, "No matter how crowded the room is, you're the only one I see." 2 weeks later, I showed up at her work unannounced and gave her a single white rose with a kiss. And then I left. For Valentine's Day last year, I told her that I had to work and wouldn't be able to go with her to my son's hockey game. I suggested that we get together for a quick drink before the hockey game just to touch base. What she didn't know was I had arranged to have somebody else take my son to his game. When I met her for a drink, I showed up in a suit and tie, which I don't wear often. I introduced myself by another name and pretended I was a stranger from out of town and asked her if I could join her. It took a little convincing, but I managed to get her to play along, and I spent the next hour plying my charms to make her feel like I was a stranger just trying to pick her up. After an hour, I told her I had dinner reservations at a nearby restaurant, one of her favorites, and told her some company would be very welcome as I hate to dine alone. She said she had things to do at home but would think about it. This took me back a little bit, but I took it to mean that she was just playing along. I left for the restaurant and waited. Thankfully, she showed up a half hour later. She told me she wasn't going to come but changed her mind at the last minute. We had a great dinner and wonderful conversation, and I continued to ply my charms as much as possible, trying to make her feel pursued and sought after. My goal was to make her feel special. After dinner, I told her I had had a wonderful evening and would like to continue, so I invited her to the hotel that I was staying at for a nightcap and more conversation. Remember, I'm still playing the stranger from out of town. She told me she wasn't sure that would be appropriate as she is a married woman, but would think about it. I gave her my room number and the hotel I was staying at and told her the invitation was there if she changed her mind. From there, I left and went to the hotel and waited for her. In the hotel, I had a couple bottles of her favorite wine. I don't care for wine myself, but I figured I could make an exception for the occasion. Chocolate-covered strawberries. And a cheese and cracker plate all set up awaiting her arrival. She never showed or called. I stayed in the hotel by myself that night. We weren't fighting about anything at the time, and there was nothing that I was trying to make up for. We were in a good place. To this day, I still don't know why she didn't show up, and quite frankly, I'm not about to ask. I would think that she should be offering up an explanation, and if she doesn't think that is warranted, then bringing it up will only make me more than a little angry, so it's best left alone. These are just a few examples of the things I was trying to do to make her feel loved and to make her realize how much I loved her. There were small gestures like love letters and random emails telling her she's beautiful, and bigger gestures like the ones above, but after 2 years of these efforts, to have her stand me up in a hotel room was the knife in my heart that made me give up. I'm not saying this to make someone go, "Oh, what a great guy." I say this to acknowledge that I have to own my part and to say I did make the effort, but it has to go both ways. We've talked about this so many times, but nothing ever comes of it other than a fight. While all this was going on, she gradually was becoming more bitter and angry at the outside world. I mentioned that this wasn't directed at me, but I still had a front row seat to the war she was waging on the world. I've known people that when I first met them, I've found them to be very attractive, and when I've gotten to know them and found out the beauty was only on the outside, and my perception of them changed and I saw their attractiveness diminish because of who they were. I've known people that I wasn't attracted to, but once I got to know them and seen the kind of people they were, I found them more and more attractive as I got to know them. I believe in the beauty inside, and despite my hang-ups on obesity, I've always found my wife attractive for those reasons. But now she is becoming the person I've always tried to avoid. She is negative about everything, always expects the worst, and only sees the bad. If 10 good things happened in her day and one bad thing, she would focus solely on the one bad thing and would let it shape her mood for the rest of the day and night. I've talked to her about this, I've expressed how it is affecting the kids and her relationship with them, and I've expressed my concerns about how she is alienating herself from her social circle as a result of this as well. During these discussions, she gets mad and we end up fighting for the next 2 hours until I just concede that I was out of line for saying anything, and then she broods about it for the next week. On a positive note, when I got home from work yesterday, she showed me that she picked up 2 self-help books. They are about anger management. I asked her what compelled her to pick them up, and she admitted that she needs to let go of her anger because it is poisoning the relationships in her life. The realization moment came when she gets called into a meeting with the Board of Conduct at our hockey association over complaints they have received about her. I guess when it comes from somebody else, it validates what me and the kids have been saying for a long time. Hopefully this is a good step that will end in us not having to walk on eggshells for the rest of our lives. Way back when I first proposed, we were happy but in no hurry to set a date. About a year passed and she started talking about setting a date. By this time, I saw that she had started putting on a little weight, so I in very gentle terms made the promise that if she lost a little weight that I noticed she had put on, that we would set a date. She knew my issues with obesity because of my mother, and she took it better than most women would have. I told her that loved her and wanted to be with her, but I wasn't going to end up married to my mother. If she wanted marriage, she was going to have to show me that she could take care of herself. Long story short, she put on a pair of sweatpants and 100 pounds and never looked back. Could we have gotten married anyway? Of course. For the first little while I was holding on to my principles, but after a while it just seemed like, what's the point? We had been together for so long I didn't see the need to validate anything with paper. Since then, I've actually adopted the philosophy that separating should be the easiest thing in the world and marriage the hard part. When it's easy to separate, people tend to work harder to stay together. Looking forward to today, 30 years later, it is just a matter of happiness. She is angry all the time, there must be a reason for it. She obviously isn't happy with the life I'm giving her, and she is taking it out on everyone around her. She won't communicate with me, so I have no idea why she's unhappy, but it is obvious that she is. Is there any point in wasting more of her life and mine if the end result is just going to be a miserable existence until we are waiting to age? Oh, we hear everything about the spouses that saw the flags, did the PI work, and pieced together the puzzle until they finally had enough proof to confront. Has anybody ever caught their spouse actually doing the deed? Would be interested to hear how that went. Discovery is one thing, but walking in on it is a whole no issue. Did it play a role in whether or not to reconcile? So maybe it's just me getting a little bitter in my old age, maybe just swallowed one too many red pills, but I find myself wondering if marriage is still going to be a thing 20, 30, 40 years from now. The millennials don't seem too anxious to marry, and it's no real wonder there. A good portion of them have grown up in broken homes and watched bitter, angry parents do whatever they could to screw each other over, so no surprise they don't want any part of that. In addition to that, looking at it from a gender-biased perspective, it's no secret that the family court system weighs heavily against men when it comes to divorce. All too often men are bled dry financially and forced to live a fairly poor standard of life while their XWs are taken out and wined and dined and continue to live a fairly comfortable standard of life. I'm not saying that women don't endure financial hardship with divorce, but social traditions still make it easier for women to have a healthy social life, while the same cannot be said for men. My point being that there is a lot of young men being raised that see this and decide quite early that they don't want to be victimized the same way, so they have no interest in marriage. Young women see their mothers become much happier after leaving what their mothers describe as a miserable marriage. 70% of all divorces are initiated by women, so it would be fair for them to draw the conclusion after watching their mothers live a happier life as a single divorcee, that they too want no part of marriage, as they can clearly see they would be happier as a single. Now, as far as the older generations go, those that are married will of course eventually be fading off, and those that are divorced are pretty much in the same camp as the above. How many people have we seen here where after their ugly divorce they swear up and down they will never go down that road again? Now let's add in the sociological shift that has been happening over the last number of years. Men seem to be increasingly vilified in media with things, and it is a wonder that men aren't afraid to talk to women completely. I had a friend tell me that he, married for 20 years, won't go sit in the park for a quiet afternoon anymore for fear that he is going to have the police questioning him about why he is there. There is an ever-increasing social pressure against men as the media bombards them with negativity towards the male gender. Men are growing up being told they are to blame for all evil. I believe that this is going to cause a greater divide between genders at a time when there seems to be such a huge movement towards equality. I have a 24-year-old son, and in speaking with his friends, none of them have a very positive view on marriage or on committing in any relationship. They have a pretty negative view on their place in marriage and relationships and have all but sworn off them. I find myself wondering where this path we seem to be on is going to lead us. My comment: I think marriage is changing. In the past it had a much stronger practical component. Women had a very difficult time having successful lives by themselves, so they needed a husband. I'm sure some people married for love, but for many it was just a requirement to have a normal life. Now that we have much more equality, women don't need to be married. This eliminates one of the motivations for marriage, so it would be natural for the rate to decline. People who want to be married can and still do so.